Hey everybody, Cole Webster down here at the Barn Nursery, and we've been getting all sorts of questions about the freeze and what do I need to do. So I brought in an expert here, Brent Grunfeld from Monrovia Nursery, and he's going to tell you a little bit about things to do in the landscape, and I'm also going to tell you things that I would do in the landscape, and we're going to show you on plants that we've had affected by the freeze here at the Barn Nursery. Okay, so we've got some Nandina here, and these are mature. They were planted here. We planted these when I was in middle school, if that tells you how long they've been there.
Been here a few years.
Yeah, been there about 17 years now while aging myself. What would you do with these Nandinas here? What are your options, Brent?
So Cole, Nandinas are one of the plants that got hit the worst during the freeze. This plant you can see is pretty much defoliated from the top down to the bottom. It doesn't have very many leaves left. You've got two choices on this plant. You can cut it back really hard all the way back into here, and hopefully the new growth is going to flush out, or you can pull it out. Because if you let this thing just leaf out from the top, it's going to be pretty ugly, and it's not going to be what you had when before the freeze. So really two options: cut it back hard and hope that it leaves out, or pull it out. So Cole, we're here in front of the Kaleidoscope Abelia, which is
Man,
on
it's
your
looking
property.
toasty.
Well, it's definitely looking toasty, but the good news here is that I think this is going to be fine. So we're going to reach in here, we're going to scrape the bark, and let's see, you can see that it's green there, all right?
Oh, wow.
That's a great sign.
Yeah.
So I think what's going to happen here, you don't have to take out this group of plants because these have been here a while and they've gotten really nice and full. I think
I planted these about 8 years ago, 10 years ago, so I'd like to not get rid of them.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to have to. Abelias took a really hard hit in the landscape, and they defoliated. And normally they are semi-evergreen, so they're going to hold on to a lot of their leaves.
Right.
But I think these here, just on your Abelias, just taking a pretty hard prune on them. Now these here are about 3 feet tall. I'd probably bring these back, cut them at least a third to a half back. And they, I think by middle of summer, they're going to leaf back out and look like nice plants.
Yeah.
Helps rejuvenate your landscape too.
Would you just hit them with like plant tone or holly tone, a good organic fertilizer?
Yeah, don't do it too early, but definitely, giving them some fertilizer is going to be great. I really like holly
First week of
tone.
March, you think?
First week of March, somewhere's in the March, beginning of April time period. So as they come out of dormancy and they wake up and want to flush out, they'll have some nutrients to get. Right. Now, one thing we have to really be mindful of is that, Kaleidoscope Abelia is a really hardy plant. And the plant, it wasn't the plant that made this happen. It was the weather. It was going from 55 degrees in the morning to
about 8 degrees.
To 8 degrees in like 8 to 10 hours. It was just a quick dip in the temperature, and the plants just didn't have a chance to really react and get enough moisture stored in their foliage.
Yeah. That hadn't happened in my lifetime. That I can, that I've heard of, and I've talked to growers all over the country, especially in the southern region, and they've told me that back in the mid 80s was the last time that it's been like that. And nobody knows better than the growers, because it's when it stays cold for days at a time. When it's below about 10 degrees, 15 degrees for more than 12 hours, you're going to see a lot of damage in it. It'll get that cold, but then it'll go back up. Yeah. But it doesn't go from 55 down to single digits and stay there for days on end, and that's why we're seeing so much damage. Yeah,
and the speed of which it went down, that was the thing that really hurt us in this situation. Right. So, the last big one I remember was 2007, Easter of 2007. Yeah. Everything was flushed out. Now that's worse than what we had. If everything was flushed out, at least things were more in dormant period. So you're going to see plants that aren't affected, and right next to plants that are affected and aren't affected, and kind of wonder why. It's every plant's different, just like every human being's different.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny. It can differ from area to area. Some of the skip laurels we have here aren't showing much damage, but they're in between some monster magnolias and other things. And so it all depends on the area. It depends on the plant. My front porch is really well covered, but there are things just right on the other side of the fence there where I've got some boxwoods that I wouldn't have thought got hurt at all that that they look like they're going to have to come out of the ground.
Yeah.
And so it all just depends. And if you have questions, that's what we're here for at the barn. We're going to show you a few other things though.
Okay.
All right, so we're looking at the freeze damage here on these Loropetalum. They've gotten bit back there. This is an older Chang's Ruby Loropetalum that has been here for a little while. Because I've seen a lot of them that don't have any foliage on it. Again, this is really protected back in here.
Yep.
But what would you do with this? Because I mean, it certainly doesn't look pretty.
So this plant, compared to a lot of the Loropetalum that I've seen out in the landscape, this one looks great. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
But most of when you get out of unprotected areas, and either out in medians in commercial situations, or even at your home where the Loropetalum is maybe on the north or western side of the house,
or even a more dwarf variety.
Some of the new dwarf varieties, they weren't as well established. They're completely brown. So what's going to happen in most cases? This plant is going to defoliate. It's going to lose most of its foliage. Now, it's not going to lose this here, but it's going to lose this here. So you're going to lose all the brown leaves. And so what I would do in the spring on this one, early spring, is cut this back to force new growth lower into the plant to help it fill back out. And you might miss the bloom cycle on it.
Right.
But as long
It's
as
just a little fringe flower anyways.
Right,
It's more
yeah.
important to take care of the plant.
Yes, let's get the plant taken care of. Fertilize it, trim it back, and rejuvenate the plant. There's no need to pull this out. Some may need to come out. Some of the varieties, Loropetalum has so many different varieties. Some of the dwarf varieties may not come back as strong as some of the bigger varieties.
Especially if they're newly planted and haven't been there for a little while.
Correct.
Or again, it comes up to your tolerance. If it's planted right in front of the front door, you may want to replace it anyways.
Right.
But those are some nice tips on Loropetalum. This one in particular, if it's looking like this, cut it back about 3/4 of the way down,
Yeah.
and then fertilize it. And you're going to do that in mid-March.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, also keep in mind, you could have a Loropetalum that has all these brown leaves on it. Okay, totally covered on it. Still doesn't mean it's dead.
No.
Loropetalum is one of those things I would trim back before I'd pull it out.
Absolutely.
Unless your tolerance is, it's got to go. It's got to look better.
Right,
So, yeah.
right. But you can absolutely work with these Loropetalum.
Yeah.
All right, so one of my favorite plants, because it's a good evergreen, and then it'll give you a bloom, is the Indian Hawthorne. And these guys, these have been in the ground for a lot of years. The older they get, usually the less damage they have, but I'm actually surprised these aren't more damaged. There's a lot of crispy leaves in there that I think will show a little bit more, but what's your suggestion with Indian Hawthorns?
So if your Indian Hawthorne looks like this, you're in great shape. A little bit of damage inside, those are just going to drop off. It's going to be fine. This is going to set flower buds and bloom and flush out just fantastic. I wouldn't really do anything to this plant. But I know in other areas that aren't as protected or a little farther out of the city, the Indian Hawthorne or Raphiolepis, they took a pretty drastic hit, and they're brown. So
I saw some at the Publix over in North Shore that, they don't have a leaf on them that's alive.
Yeah.
They weren't mine, so I didn't reach down and scratch the bark or anything. But this is one like the Loropetalum that and the Abelia that really kind of make me nervous with how much damage they show. But I have seen these completely defoliate.
Yes.
And come back.
Yes. They will.
And so you can, again, what's your tolerance? What's your patience?
Correct.
What's the location of the plant? If it's in your backyard, kind of in a corner, or maybe an area of the yard that isn't very well seen, just give it some time, fertilize it in middle of March, with a organic fertilizer that's not gonna shock it or anything like that. you know, it should come back for you.
Yeah, so time will tell on this plant. You may have some black tips if it's totally defoliated. You may have some black tips on it. And if that's the case, then you'll want to trim past those black tips to get into that green wood. But scratch it to make sure it's still alive before you do anything.
Yeah. So, you know, any of the plants we're talking about, any shrub, anything that you're concerned about, scratching the bark and seeing if you see any green in there is just such a great tell sign that, you know, I mean, it's very simple. It's not that complicated. But, you know, if you're concerned, comment a question on here. You know, we're here to help. So, yeah. All right, one of my favorites, a southern favorite, just as southern as the magnolia, is the azalea.
Yeah.
And we are seeing tons of damage in a lot of the encore azaleas, the Echo series of azaleas, and you know, a lot of these are gonna almost fully defoliate. And again, it depends on your protection, where it is. But what is this going to mean for our bloom cycle this year? I mean, you know, we sell thousands of these a year.
So it'll be interesting. It's going to really be dependent on where the plant was if you're going to lose your blooms this year. I have azaleas in my house. I'm not going to get blooms on them.
Yeah.
Here, this plant here, these buds look fine on this plant. You can see in here, your flower buds in there. The plant looks fine. Does it have brown leaves? Yes. I think what's going to happen is a lot of the leaves are going to drop off the plant. So you could have a plant in some cases that's blooming without any leaves, kind of you know, like a fully
like a native.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think what's going to happen is these are going to be most of these azaleas are going to be fine. There's definitely going to be some varieties that didn't make it.
Yeah.
So
newer plantings.
Newer plantings, and there's maybe some varieties that just tolerate cold differently. You know, the Encore series has so many different ones in it, but you know, it's a great hardy variety for the Chattanooga area. But some varieties may react differently.
Well, and two things with them being protected is, you know, when they're protected, they also didn't get as warm. So, you know, we had warm days, you know, where they got really warm being out in the open right before it got really cold. And so, you know, that the sugars were up in the plant, and it didn't have time to, you know, pull those back down to the root. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see tons of damage here, but hopefully nothing too bad. You know, that azaleas love acidic soil, so make sure you hit them with hollyton. In middle of March.
You can do March. It depends on how much pruning you're going to have to do to it. But one thing you don't want to do is if you see that you have buds that are alive, let it bloom and then defoliate and then cut it back hard.
Right.
Because if you cut it back before it blooms, it's not going to bloom again for the spring.
Right.
So when you cut it back, fertilize it then. Or if your plant looks like this one, and this one maybe doesn't get pruned back.
Yeah.
Fertilize it. If it gets pruned back, it's going to have a light trim to it, and then fertilize it in March, like Cole was saying.
So here we are next to the skip laurels, and I am getting all sorts of pictures from people that are up in higher elevations, Jasper Highlands, Lookout Mountain, Signal Mountain, that are having tons of damage. But you can see this doesn't have nearly the damage as others because it's so protected.
You know, the key on these plants being protected, I was protected back there. I felt like I was kind of hidden away. These plants around us, there's a big, I think it's a Zelkova there, there's magnolias here, there's a dogwood right in front of it. This plant is protected. So, whereas this doesn't have as much damage, this plant's gonna be fine in the spring. It's gonna lose some leaves, it's got some leaf damage, as you can see here. It's gonna defoliate. But I live up in Nashville, and there's not a skip laurel that's gonna survive in the spring. It's pretty tough. And then I know when you go around the Chattanooga area, there's a lot of damaged skip laurels here as well. Yeah. You can have hedges that are, 30, 50, 100 feet long.
Yeah.
Their plants are dead, and that's because they're out in the wide open. There was nothing there to protect them. So autos, which are another type of cherry laurel, those are another plant that took a lot of damage. And if they were protected, kind of like this was, because of the canopy and where it is, you know, they'll be better. But the fact is the ones out in the open, be patient. The key on a lot of this is be patient, because a lot of it will come back. But if you're not patient, what can you do now?
Yeah. Well, you can take them up and you can replace them. And I caution people a lot of times when we have some colder weather, people never want to put the same plant back, and it's not the plant's fault. I mean, there are hedges in town that are much older than I am, that are autos and skips, and I mean those are the older ones, but they have made it through all sorts of degree changes. But this year it going from 55 and then them never really hardening off for the winter, down to those temperatures is just so damaging. And you can replace those. And also I think it's important that people also I think it's important to be patient if you can be, but you also have to know what your tolerance level is.
That is so true.
And there are certain things here at the nursery where we have to replace them. We need to always look good. And then there are other areas where we can wait. If you have the front of your house might be a different issue than the back of your house, because I have that right now. I've got some boxwoods behind my house that I can't believe they're showing damage, but they are. And I'm going to be patient with them. I'm going to fertilize them. I'm not going to replace them, but I've got some Distilleum right out in the front of my house that I'm not going to be patient enough to wait for them. So I think that everybody also, you have to make your own decision based on where the plant is, not only for how protected it is, but for how fruitful it is in your landscape.
Yeah, I have the same situation in my house. My autoleucans, the hedge in front of my garage, it's right in front of the house. It needs to be replaced. Yeah. I'm not known as a patient person. So
you can say that again.
So I'm taking them out. I'm not going to wait until June to see what happens. I'm going to replace them. So when I get some free time in here, it could be January, February, I'm going to go out and I'm going to take out the dead ones and I'm going to replace them.
And if you do make that decision now as opposed to later, you're going to be planning at a better time. Otherwise, if you're waiting till June or July, you may actually be better off waiting until the fall at that point.
True.
But I mean, around these parts you can plan about any time. So again, it depends on your budget, your patience, everything else. But I think that this has given people a lot of good information. I think that there's a lot of hope out there for a lot of plants. There's some that there may not be, but it also comes down to your patience. But you didn't choose the wrong plant. It just was a very unforeseen, unprecedented weather situation that we haven't seen.
And that is very important for people to realize, is that you didn't choose the right plant or the wrong plant. It was a bad set of circumstances. So if you like that plant, go back and plant the same thing. If you wanted to make a change, plant something else. But it's not the plant. It was the weather.
And you're going to have some dead limbs and some in your Japanese maples and different things. And those are things you just be patient with. Take a look at it. Send us a picture of it. Come in, show us a picture, and we can kind of give you a little bit of a guideline for, hey, this is what we would do. Or sometimes the best thing to do is to wait. So
crepe myrtles is going to be a great example of that's one this year I think you really want to have patience on. Crepe myrtles were dormant when this came in. Crepe myrtles normally are going to start to leaf out here in April. Some springs it could be early April, some springs it could be late April. This year it might be later. So be patient on crepe myrtles. Don't go digging up crepe myrtles prematurely. They may have some damage in the tops. Some, depending on where you are, they might die down to the ground, and then you'll have to cut the top off and let it flush back out.
Make a decision there also.
Exactly.
You have the patience there.
Right.
And then also hydrangeas. I know I'm going to have a lot of people asking me what's wrong with their hydrangeas, and it's not the fact that they have a bad plant. It's going to be just that hard for you.
So the thing on hydrangeas, you've got multiple classes of hydrangeas. You've got the paniculata ones, which are the ones that bloom during the summer. That's like a limelight or a candy apple.
Like a limelight.
Well, here's the limelight flower here. There you go. So that's summer blooming. Those bloom on old and new wood. You can trim that back anytime and it's going to bloom. I don't think there's going to be any issues on paniculatus. Now, the group that we're probably the most concerned about is your macrophyllus. And that's the one that's got that blue or pink lace cap flower, or it's got a mop head. Some people call it a mop head flower. So that's the one. I'm not sure what's going to happen this year. I think the plant survived. I don't think that's a question. Right. I think it's gonna leaf back out.
I've seen too many times where they don't put on a bloom after a little bit of funky weather. And with this, I happen to agree with you. They may just look like a little green perennial sitting there.
Yes, or they'll flower later in the season.
Almost fall.
Yeah,
August.
Mid to late summer. Yeah. So I think the plants will come out from the bottom. They'll leaf out, but whereas you traditionally see new growth coming off the stems, I'm not so sure we're going to see that. Don't cut it back yet. Wait till you see the plant come out of dormancy in the spring, see where your leaves are coming from, and then move from there. And you may not get flowers this year. Just might not. But next year you will. The key is fertilize them, keep them healthy and happy that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brent. When you're in the store, buy that green bucket. I know that'll make Brent happy. And if you have any questions, just come see us or drop us a line, and we'll be happy to answer the question, and we'll answer it the best that we can. So thank you.
Thank you.